I asked my boyfriend for a break. He accepted. A year later, I went back to his house and told him I was ready for a stable relationship. The coward told me he didn't want to be with me just because I was pregnant. He can't do this to me. I am literally shaking right now because I just realized how mediocre some people choose to be when life hands them a premium opportunity. For 3 years, I gave Mark the privilege of being the man behind the brand. The one who got to witness my rise in the digital space from the front row. Honestly, our relationship was fine for what it was, but I started feeling this heavy, static energy holding back my main character vibes. As someone building a personal brand, I couldn't have a partner who was content with just existing while I was trying to explore my full potential in the city. Mark was safe, sure, but he was like a background extra in a movie that was supposed to be a blockbuster. I deserved a narrative that moved at a higher frequency, and I knew I had to take a step back to find it. A year ago, I sat him down and explained that I needed what I called a growth sabbatical. It wasn't a breakup in the traditional, messy sense. It was a strategic pause to ensure our trajectories actually aligned. I even drafted a formal pause agreement, very professional, very clean, stating we were on a total break with zero obligations, so I could vibrate at a higher frequency without guilt. I thought he'd argue or beg me to stay, which would have at least shown some passion, but he just sat there looking pathetic. He looked at the document, sighed, and said, "If that's what you need to find yourself, go ahead, Chloe." It was almost insulting how easily he accepted it, as if he didn't realize he was losing his most valuable asset. During my time away, I really leaned into the indie scene and connected with some true visionaries who understood my aesthetic. One of them was this creative director who promised to help me transition into a more maternal, grounded brand identity, which was a pivot I'd been considering. We had a brief, intense collaboration that resulted in a positive pregnancy test, but naturally, visionaries aren't big on staying for the sequel once things get real. He disappeared the moment I mentioned prenatal vitamins, which honestly just proved he wasn't ready for my level of commitment. That's when I realized that Mark was actually the perfect supporting character for my next chapter, motherhood. He's stable, he's predictable, and he already knows my coffee order, which is essential for a high-stress pregnancy arc. I decided to be the bigger person and let him back into my narrative, assuming he'd been waiting in the wings this whole time. I showed up at our old apartment today, glowing, suitcase in hand, ready to give him the surprise of his life. I tried my key in the lock, expecting it to glide open like it always did, but the lock didn't turn at all. It made this jarring, off-brand grinding sound that was honestly very triggering, given my current emotional state. I had to knock like a common solicitor, which was so demeaning after everything I've done for his social standing. When Mark finally opened the door, he didn't even look impressed by my bump or the fact that I was offering him a second chance. He stood there in the doorway, blocking my entrance as if I hadn't spent years decorating that living room to match my feed. I told him, "Surprise! I've done my exploring, I've found myself, and I'm ready to settle down and let you be the father figure this baby deserves." I expected him to be relieved, maybe even a little tearful, but instead he looked at me like I was a stranger. He actually had the audacity to say, "Chloe, we've been over for a year. I'm not the father, and I'm not an insurance policy." I was stunned by his tone. It was so cold and completely lacked the warmth I require from my inner circle. It is absolutely insane to me that he thinks a technicality like a year-long break cancels out years of curated history. I told him he was being incredibly selfish by focusing on his own feelings when there's a literal human being involved now. I'm the one who decided when the break started, so logically I should be the one to decide when it ends. He tried to claim he'd moved on, which is just code for being bitter that I had a more exciting year than he did. He's trying to cancel my future just because he can't handle the responsibility of a high-value woman. I'm literally the victim of his lack of vision, and he's acting like I'm the one who did something wrong. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "So let me get this straight. So vibrated yourself into a pregnancy with some random indie guy and now you want the static guy to pay for it? The delusion is top tier." Ops reply, "You clearly don't understand how partnerships work. A partner's primary job is to be a safety net for the creator's journey, regardless of the plot twists along the way." Anonymous user 2 says, "Why on earth did you think your key would still work after a year of zero contact? People change locks when they want the trash to stay out." Ops reply, "Energy-wise, that apartment is still my home because I'm the one who gave it its aesthetic value." A lock is just a physical barrier. It doesn't change the spiritual ownership. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and I am still reeling from the absolute lack of empathy coming from Mark's direction. I've been forced to stay at a mid-range hotel nearby because he refuses to let me into our space, and honestly, the lighting here is doing nothing for my skin. I've spent more on room service in 3 days than I usually spend on skincare, and it's all because Mark is being incredibly difficult. He won't even answer my texts unless they're about when I'm picking up the 3 boxes of junk he left in the hallway. I can't believe he's treating my carefully archived archives and vintage wardrobe as junk, just to spite me. It's a level of pettiness that I honestly didn't think he was capable of. And it's very disappointing. Since Mark was being so unresponsive, I decided to move the conversation to someone who actually has a sense of family values. His mother, Susan. Susan and I always had a great rapport. She used to comment, "Queen," on all my posts and was practically my biggest fan. I called her to explain the situation, making sure she understood that her son is emotionally abandoning his potential grandchild. I told her that this whole refusal to reconcile was a very bad look for their family's reputation in the long run. I expected her to talk some sense into him, maybe remind him that he's lucky. I'm even considering him for this role. I was prepared for her to offer me a guest room or at least some financial support for the nursery. I'm planning. Instead of being the supportive grandmother-to-be I expected, Susan was shockingly cold and actually quite rude. She told me that Mark had finally healed from our relationship and that she wouldn't let me infect his peace again. In fact, I'm an upgrade, a literal breath of fresh air compared to the boring life he's been living since I left. She said some very hurtful things about how I used her son, which is a total projection of her own insecurities. I tried to explain that I was advocating for the child's heritage, but she just hung up on me like I was some telemarketer. I've never felt so disrespected by someone I've given so much engagement to over the years. The stress of being rejected by a woman who once admired me was so intense that I had to take it to my stories. I posted a very cryptic, high-contrast photo with the caption, "Loyalty is a dead trend," just to vent my frustrations. I didn't mention names, but anyone with a brain could tell I was talking about the lack of support I'm receiving. Within an hour, Mark's sister, Sarah, was texting me, telling me to stop sub-posting her family and to leave them alone. She had the nerve to tell me that I'm harassing them when all I'm doing is expressing my truth as a creator. It's like they've all formed a pact to treat me like a stranger just because I exercised my right to a sabbatical. I'm just trying to protect my baby's right to a stable home with a father figure who has a steady income and a clean apartment. They're acting like I'm the villain for wanting a classic family structure after my period of exploration. It's so hypocritical because Susan is always posting about family first. Yet she's turning her back on me when I need her most. I'm starting to think the whole family has a low vibration mindset that they're trying to force onto me. They don't seem to realize that I'm the one doing them a favor by offering them a spot in this new chapter. It's honestly exhausting being the only person in this situation who cares about the long-term brand of the family. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says you don't call the mom to force a guy to be a stepdad to a baby that isn't his. That's not advocating for heritage. That's just being a stalker. Ops reply, I am advocating for the child's right to a stable environment. Heritage isn't just DNA. It's about who has the best furniture and the most consistent presence. Anonymous user 2 says the baby's actual father left. The ex-boyfriend won't take you back and you're genuinely worried about the hotel's ring light? Priorities, honey. Ops reply, my image is my career. I won't let my brand suffer just because the people around me are choosing to be difficult and unsupportive. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and I realized that the reason Mark is being so stubborn is that he's clearly hurt and acting out of spite. He's always struggled with seeing the big picture, so I decided I needed to rebrand the situation for him in a way he could understand. I spent 3 days creating a beautifully curated PDF. Basically a high-end mood board of our future life together as a family. It wasn't just text. It had color palettes for the nursery, potential baby names that sound good in voiceovers, and a co-parenting manifesto. In the manifesto, I graciously allowed him to pay for 80% of the expenses since I'll be busy creating motherhood content, which benefits the whole family brand. I thought that by showing him the visual potential of our reconciliation, he'd finally snap out of this broken up phase. I even included a section for a gender reveal event that we could co-host, which would have been huge for his social standing. I sent it to his email with the subject line, "Our new narrative, a proposal," and I waited for him to see the vision. To my surprise, he actually responded and agreed to meet me at a local cafe to discuss things. I was so relieved. I thought he was finally coming around and realizing that he couldn't just walk away from a lead role. I spent 2 hours on my makeup to make sure I looked exhausted but ethereal to trigger his protective instincts. I walked into that cafe feeling like the protagonist of a very successful comeback story. However, Mark showed up looking incredibly tired, and not in a longing for me way, but more like he was annoyed to be there. He didn't even comment on the PDF's layout or the thought I put into the font choices. Instead, he pulled out a physical, printed copy of the pause agreement I wrote a year ago, which was such a retro and aggressive move. He had highlighted the specific line where I wrote, "Neither party shall have any claim, emotional or financial, over the other's life during or after this period of exploration." He pointed to it and said that this was the only document that mattered to him now. It was so frustrating to see him use my own professional work against me like that. I tried to explain that the agreement was metaphorical and only meant to apply if I wanted it to, but he wouldn't listen. He told me that he's actually moving to another state for a new job next month and has already signed a lease. He's literally trying to move out of my orbit entirely, which is the most dramatic and unnecessary reaction to a little bit of growth. I told him he was being a coward for running away from his responsibilities just because the plot got a little complicated. He just looked at me and said, "Chloe, you're the one who wrote the script where I don't exist. I'm just following your directions." It was such a manipulative thing to say, trying to blame me for his own decision to leave. I sat there while he finished his coffee, trying to find a way to make him see that his new job doesn't matter compared to our potential as a power couple. He didn't even look at the gender reveal mock-ups I'd printed out for him. He just stood up, thanked me for the coffee, which I paid for, by the way, and walked out. I'm honestly baffled by how someone can be so resistant to a clear, well-designed path to happiness. He's choosing a mediocre job in another state over a curated life with me. It's a total waste of his potential, and it's incredibly unfair that he's taking my supporting character away, right when I need him most. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "Did you seriously send a PDF to a guy who doesn't want you? That's not a mood board. It's evidence for a restraining order." Ops reply, "Visual aids are often necessary for low vibration thinkers like Mark who can't conceptualize a future without a guide." I was being helpful. Anonymous user 2 says, "You literally gave him a get out of jail free card signed by yourself. He's not being a coward, he's being literate." Ops reply, "The agreement was a living document subject to my creative direction. It's not my fault he's choosing a literal interpretation over a spiritual one." Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the situation has devolved into something truly toxic, all because of Mark's refusal to cooperate. I realized I had to do something drastic to save my vision for our family before he moved away and ruined everything. I went to our old apartment complex while I knew Mark was at work, hoping to get some closure by being in the space again. The building manager, Greg, used to follow me on Instagram and always liked my home decor posts back in the day. I gave him a little subscriber-exclusive smile and told him I'd forgotten some of my pregnancy vitamins inside and that Mark was fine with me going in. He was so starstruck that he actually let me in without calling Mark, which just goes to show the power of a strong personal brand. Once I was inside, I realized how much the energy of the place had shifted. It was so single guy and boring. It was practically offensive. I spent the whole afternoon redecorating, taking down those hideous posters Mark had put up and replacing them with more neutral aesthetic pieces I'd brought. I even set up my tripod in the nursery to film a coming home reel to announce our reconciliation to my followers. I wanted the lighting to be perfect for the moment. Mark walked through the door and saw how I'd transformed the space back into a home. I was midway through a transition shot when the door opened, and I prepared my surprised and grateful face. Mark didn't cry with joy, and he didn't even notice the new throw pillows I'd meticulously placed on the sofa. Instead, he looked absolutely horrified and immediately took his phone out, but not to take a picture of me. He called the police right then and there, which was such an over-the-top dramatic reaction to a simple interior design update. He didn't even call them for a break-in. He told the dispatcher he needed a wellness check because his ex was having a delusional episode in his living room. It was the most insulting thing anyone has ever said to me, especially considering I'm 7 months pregnant and clearly just trying to help. I had to stand there and explain to 2 uniformed officers that I wasn't having a delusional episode. I was simply manifesting my relationship back. They looked at me like I was the crazy one, ignoring the fact that Mark was the one weaponizing the system against a creator. They made me leave the apartment immediately. And Greg, the manager, wouldn't even look at me as I walked past the lobby. I found out later that he blocked me on Instagram, which is a huge loss for him, honestly. Mark didn't even have the courage to talk to me face to face. He just let the police handle his dirty work like a total coward. Later that night, Mark sent me one final text that was so cold, it practically froze my screen. He wrote, "The break is permanent. I've changed the locks again, Greg is fired, and if you come near me or my family again, I'm filing for a permanent injunction. Don't mention me in your content ever again." It's so ironic that the pause agreement I used to get away from his static energy is now the legal shield he's using to keep me away. He's completely misinterpreted my intentions and is acting like I'm some sort of threat instead of a visionary. I'm literally just a woman trying to provide a curated life for her child, and he's treating me like a criminal. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says calling the wellness check is the ultimate unsubscribe button. He didn't just dump you, he called in the pros to deal with the crazy. Oops, reply Mark is weaponizing the system against a creator who is just trying to improve his lifestyle. It's a very low vibration move to involve the police. Anonymous user 2 says you broke into his house and changed his curtains while he was at work. Why on earth would you think that leads to love? Ops reply I was improving his environment for free. Most people would pay for that kind of creative consultation, but he's too small-minded to see the value. Update 4. It's been 6 months since my last update, and my life has taken a turn that I never could have predicted in my wildest mood boards. My daughter, Serafina, is 3 months old now, and while she's absolutely beautiful, she doesn't have any aesthetic sponsorships yet. It's been incredibly difficult to maintain my brand while living in my parents' basement, which has zero natural light and very retro wallpaper. I've had to scale back my content significantly because the motherhood arc is much harder to film when you're doing all the behind-the-scenes work yourself. I'm constantly exhausted, and Serafina doesn't seem to care about my filming schedule at all, which is a major hurdle for my engagement. Mark actually followed through on his threat and moved to another state. I don't even know which city he's in anymore. I saw a photo of him recently on a mutual friend's feed, and it was like looking at a completely different person. He looks happy, fit, and this is the most insulting part, he was with someone who looks normal. She doesn't have a ring light, she doesn't have a curated vibe, she's just a girl in a regular shirt. It's so unfair that I spent years curating him and training him to be the perfect partner, only for him to take all that training and give it to someone who didn't work for it. I tried to reach out one last time by sending him a photo of Serafina, telling him that she has his kind eyes. It was a complete lie. Her eyes are bright blue and his are a very boring brown, but I thought it was a good vibe to try and bridge the gap. He didn't even open the message, or if he did, he didn't give me the satisfaction of a read receipt. It's like I've been completely edited out of his life and he's moved on to a basic reboot that I'm not a part of. I'm left here with the consequences of a growth sabbatical that clearly went off script in the worst way possible. I realize now that when I asked for that time, I wasn't just pausing our life. I was accidentally deleting his character from my show entirely. I thought I was the director who could just call action whenever I was ready to start the next scene, but Mark decided he didn't want to be in the cast anymore. Now that I actually need a co-star to help with the heavy lifting of real life, I've realized that the lead role is a lot harder when you're the only one watching. I'm still the main character of my story, obviously, but the set is empty, the lighting is terrible, and the audience is starting to lose interest. It turns out that a stable partner isn't just static energy. They're the ones who keep the cameras running when you're too tired to hold the tripod yourself.